Khandana bhava bandhanam jagam bandhanam bandhim tamai niranjanam. हृदि कंदर तुमि तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजन हार नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्य मनातीत नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्य मनातीत मन वचनैकाधार प्रभु मन वचनैकाधार ज्योति उजल हृदि कंदर ज्योति उजल हृदि कंदर तुमि तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजन हार जिद लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग जिद लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग गाय छे छंद भगत वृंद आरती तमार गाय छे छंद भगत वृंद आरती तमार जय जय आरती तमार हर हर आरती तमार शिव शिव आरती तमार ओम ह्रीं ऋतं त्वमचलो गुणजित् गुणेड्यः नक्तं दिवं सकरुणं तव पादपद्मं मोहं कषं बहुकृतं न भजे यतोऽहं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीन बन्धो भक्तिर्भगश्च भजनं भवभेदकारी गच्छन्तलं सुविपुलं गमनाय तत्त्वं वक्रोद्धृतोऽपि हृदयं न मे भाति किञ्चित् तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीन बन्धो तेजस्तरन्ति तरसां त्वयि तृप्त तृष्णा रागे कृते ऋतपथे त्वयि राम कृष्णे मर्त्यामृतं तव पदं मरणोर्मि नाशं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीन बन्धो कृत्यं करोति कलुषं कुहकान्तकारी श्रान्तं शिवं सुविमलं तव नाम नाथ यस्मादहं त्वशरणो जगदेक गम्य तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीन बन्धो। ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ सर्वमङ्गल माङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थ साधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। सृष्टि स्थिति विनाशानां शक्ति भूते सनातनी गुणाश्रये गुणमये नारायणी नमोस्तुते। शरणागत दीनार्त परित्राण परायणे सर्वस्यारति हरे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय 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 महामाई की जय जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण देव की जय जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय। प्रकृतिं परमां अभयां वरदां नररूपधरां जनतापहरां शरणागत सेवक तोषकरीं प्रणमामि परां जननीं जगतां गुणहीन सुतान् अपराधयुतान् कृपयाद्य समुद्धर मोहगतां तरणीं भवसागर पारकरीं प्रणमामि परां जननीं जगतां विषयं कुसुमं परिहृत्य सदा चरणाम्बुरुहामृत शान्तिशुधां पिबभृङ्गमनो भवरोगहरां प्रणमामि परां जननीं जगतां कृपां कुरु महादेवी श्रुतेषु प्रणतेषु च चरणाश्रयदानेन कृपामयि नमोऽस्तु ते लज्जापटावृते नित्यं शारदे ज्ञानदायिके पापेभ्यो न सदा रक्ष कृपामयि नमोऽस्तु ते रामकृष्णगतप्राणां तन्नाम श्रवणप्रियां तद्भावरञ्जिताकारां प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः पवित्रं चरितं यस्य पवित्रं जीवनं तथा पवित्रता स्वरूपिण्यै तस्यै दिव्यै नमो नमः देवीं प्रसन्नां प्रणतान्त्रिहन्त्रीं योगीन्द्रपूज्यां युगधर्मपात्रीं तां शारदां भक्ति विज्ञानदात्रीं दयास्वरूपां प्रणमामि नित्यं स्नेहेन बध्नासि मनोष्मदीयं दोषान् शेषान् सगुनीकरोषि अहेतुनानु दयशेषदोषान् स्वाङ्के गृहीत्वा यदिदं विचित्रं प्रसीद मातर्विनयेन याचे नित्यं भव स्नेहवती श्रुतेषु प्रेमैकबिन्दुं चिरदग्धचित्ते विषिञ्च चित्तं कुरु न सुशान्तं जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रुत्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः pranamami muhurmuhu.
Namaste Atirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhasvarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we resume, at least for a couple of weeks, lecture by Vivekananda on unity and diversity. And this is where we had finished last time, so let me read it again. We find then that this world is neither optimistic nor pessimistic. It is a mixture of both. And as we go on, we shall find that the whole blame is taken away from nature and put upon our own shoulders. At the same time, the Vedanta shows the way out, but not by denial of evil, because it analyzes boldly the fact as it is and does not seek to conceal anything. It is not hopeless, it is not agnostic. It finds out a remedy, but it wants to place that remedy on adamantine foundations, not by shutting the child's mouth and blinding its eyes with something which is untrue and which the child will find out in a few days. I remember when I was young, a young man's father died and left him poorly off, with a large family to support, and he found that his father's friends were unwilling to help him. He's actually referring to himself here. Vivekananda's father had passed away when he was young, and he was faced with lots of difficulties. He had a conversation with a clergyman who offered this consolation. Oh, it is all good, all is sent for our good. Let me finish this paragraph and then we'll comment on this kind of silly statements. That is the old method of trying to put a piece of gold leaf on an old sore. It is a confession of weakness of absurdity. The young man went away, and 6 months afterwards, a son was born to the clergyman, and he gave a thanksgiving party to which the young man was invited. The clergyman prayed, "Thank God for his mercies." And the young man stood up and said, "Stop, this is all misery." The clergyman asked, "Why?" "Because when my father died, you said it was good, though apparently evil. So now this is apparently good, but really evil. Is this the way to cure the misery of the world? Be good and have mercy on those who suffer. Do not try to patch it up. Nothing will cure this world. Go beyond it." There's a follow-up on this, and the next paragraph actually gives a more penetrating answer to this question. But here, it's basically starts off with this issue of whether one is optimistic or pessimistic. But then a certain realism is supposed to come into our view of the world. Essentially, we don't really know where this notion of good or evil comes up in our lives. It's something we shall have to try to understand clearly. What is happening here? I mean, why does he mention this story of this clergyman? It's basically very often under the garb of some kind of religious ideology or theology, some completely inane and mostly insensitive answers are given. Basically, oh, this is something, this has been sent by God, as if the person who is talking about it has this direct access and is speaking with such authority. And here it's basically said, no, everything is sent for one's own good. The answer to that really is, if such a thing happens to the person saying it, how does that person react? Is that person capable of absorbing such a miserable phenomenon as one's near and dear one dying with equanimity? It's only if that person can actually practice that in his or her own life that such statements start carrying some measure of substance. And the curious thing is that people who have developed that measure of equanimity in their own lives usually simultaneously develop a certain empathy. Why? Because these miseries are things that they have actually seen through. And so they understand that when this kind of thing comes to a person's life, how difficult it is to bear with them. And because of their own experience, because they have actually seen through misery as it is and accepted it as part and parcel of life, that they develop simultaneously this empathy or sympathy for others. A person who makes this kind of an inane and callous statement that somebody near and dear has died and everything is sent for its own good is somebody who has clearly not seen through these problems, not even bothered to look at them carefully, and is parroting something from some book or from some theological doctrine. Nothing more, nothing less. In other words, such a person's attitude is something which is completely superficial, and there's no point in going to such a person for any help. What then? What really is the solution then? Does it mean that life is going to be a bed of roses? No, certainly not. Is there going to be misery coming our way? Is there going to be joy coming our way? The answer is emphatically yes. What is the way out? And then he's going to expand on this in the next paragraph. It's essentially when something comes one's way, whether good or bad, can we try to take a step back and understand what this is? In other words, if we catch hold of that with our mind, it could be a good thing or a bad thing, and then react with this effusion of joy, or the opposite, burying oneself in misery, then what has happened is that one's capacity for perception, capacity for understanding, capacity for penetrating through life's experiences to get at its essence, that part, that faculty of the mind, this penetrating capacity of the mind is lost. In the Bhashyas to the Upanishads, this is exactly what is called moha or aviveka. What has happened is that the I has lost the capacity to analyze an experience, to analyze any experience. What has happened is that something has come one's way, one has gotten caught hold of, one has been caught by that experience, and the I has been lost in that experience itself. In the object, the experiencer is lost and loses the capacity to step back and see it for what it is. It is this cultivation of the capacity to step back and look at things from a third person perspective. Instead of saying, oh, I am very happy or I am very miserable, taking a step back, this is what happiness looks like, this is what misery looks like. What happens is that the sharpness of that experience is attenuated. If our minds are caught up in experiences of momentary effusions of joy, then that same mind, when something unfortunate comes one's way, will be completely lost in that misery. And the solution, therefore, lies in this capacity to step back and not react as if one's whole being is absorbed in a particular experience. More fundamentally, once we start developing this capacity to understand these emotions of the mind, these feelings of the mind, we can start asking more basic questions. Where does this notion of good or bad come from? And here, I think a scientific attitude in terms of what we have found out about the evolution of this species called the human being, I think that's rather helpful. So I have copied a certain measure of data, and because these give us time scales which are rather difficult for us to grasp. And when there are time scales which are several orders of magnitude larger than our individual lives, then they just figure as certain numbers. And then the larger scale of things gets ignored, and this little scale of our individual life takes over. If, on the other hand, we try to understand this larger game that is going on, this larger scheme of things in terms of time scales, then our individual happinesses and miseries do not seem all that important to us. So here is the thing. How old is the Earth as a planet? About 4.5 billion years old. Yeah? Let's say, for order of magnitude, a human being lives at most 100 years. Here it's 4.5 billion years. On this planet, life as we know it is about 3.8 to 4 billion years. And we are trying to shrink things, come to smaller scales slowly. Mammals, to which all of us belong, they appeared largely after the dinosaurs went extinct, 66 million years. What is that? 4.5 billion to 66 million. Yeah? Almost 100 or at least an 80-fold. So essentially a scale of 80 decreased. Now, ancient humans, by ancient humans, I don't mean, so we are generally regarded, at least in anthropology and biology, we are regarded as modern humans. Modern humans means Homo sapiens. That's the name of the species. Yeah? So ancient humans were basically things, other varieties of what we call human as a species. So these were basically 2 million years ago. So from 66, another factor of 30. Then our predecessors were these Neanderthals. They were about 400,000 to 28,000 years back. And finally, modern human beings, Homo sapiens, is about 300,000 years back. That's where the species came into its own. Look at the numbers: 4.5 billion, life starts 4 billion, mammals 66 million, an 80-fold decrease. Ancient humans, another 30-fold decrease, 2 million. And after that, Neanderthals, that's a 5-fold decrease to 400,000, and modern human beings, 300,000 years back. Now, these are modern human beings only anatomically, yeah, which means basically if you look at their skeleton, they will look exactly the way our skeleton looks like, which means the biological system is similar. And then, essentially, at the very, I mean, for couple of 100,000 years and more, till almost just 10,000 years back. Again, another factor of 30 decrease. From 300,000 years back to maybe about 10,000 years back, modern humans, anatomically modern humans, were basically hunter-gatherers, which means they went from one place to another, hunting animals and gathering fruits and nourishing themselves with it. It's only around 10,000 years back. Just imagine how many scales we have crossed from 4.5 billion years back when the earth started to just about 10,000 years back. We find our species, human beings, settling down because of agriculture. Yeah? Being capable of cultivating essentially rice or wheat or whatever and settling down in one place. Once you have groups of people settling down, then you have this notion of a society forming. Why? Because then there's a division of labor. One group of people does one particular job well, another group of people does another job well, and an organization, societal organization starts taking place. How old is that? 10,000 years. Nothing in the it's completely negligible in the scales that we are talking about. I don't think any of us, any human being living, has the imagination to think of 4.5 billion years except as an abstract number. I mean, here is one simple thing. Say, suppose you look around in this room and there are many chairs. Can we even grasp by just looking how many chairs there are? We can guess, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 40. But can we precisely do that? No. That's the limitation that we have. And here we are talking of numbers which are way, way beyond our scope of imagination. All right? So then out of these people who have lived, who started a society some 10,000 years back, these people then started, because of need, because of this organization of societies, one has to come up with narratives which will allow this society to be bound together so that one group of people will not cause harm to another and create a degeneration of the societal fabric in years to come. This particular principle of societal organization then gives rise to the notion of good and bad. How old then is this notion of good and bad? Let's be generous and say, okay, 10,000 years. What were other species doing before that? Were they equipped with notions of good and bad? In some very rudimentary way, perhaps, but not in any essential way. So, for instance, if you look at, say, for example, these wildlife documentaries, you'll see that there are certain animals which prey on certain other animals. For what purpose? If they don't do that, they will not be able to survive. So, for the sake of survival of a species, there is preying of one species on another. And everybody preys on plants. So, is there any good or bad there? Can we bring our ethical concerns to bear there? No. The origin of the species survival, biological survival of a species, which is what we are genetically engineered to do, and survival of a species as a society are two different paradigms. And then we try to conflate these two concerns. We mix these two up and then say, oh, the world or nature is not just to me personally. What is the use of this kind of thinking? It's essentially saying that, look, nature has this large impersonal way of progressing. It is not obliged to fulfill my personal notions of what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. As a result, what happens is that a certain subjective detachment starts developing. One does not get overwhelmed by something happening and say, oh, this is so unjust. Somebody was walking along the street and was struck down by thunder or lightning. It's a natural force. The electric charge that flows during a lightning does not bother to take the permission of an individual human being crawling around on this earth before it strikes a certain spot. It's a natural phenomenon, it's guided by other laws. And when we talk about good and bad, we need to understand what background these concepts make sense in. And they make sense in the context of human societies and mutual dependence of one member of that species on another. Suppose somebody is silly enough to go into a jungle at night which is infested with wild animals, and some hungry animal comes along and demolishes that individual, eats him or her up. Is one going to start casting ethical aspersions on that particular animal? Nobody in their senses would do that. Why? Because instinctively one accepts that an animal, when hungry, is going to try to eat. And it's your business to be not silly and go into a place where these animals will come and probably pounce on you. That is a pragmatic and clear understanding of what's going on. And therefore, these good and evil are not absolute notions. They are really dependent on a particular context, and that context is the human society that we have built up rather recently in history. 10,000 years. How many generations? Suppose a person lives 100 years, 100 generations. Practically nothing compared to this 4.5 billion years, which is the age of this earth. Nothing. And in this incredibly small time scale, we expect that natural evolution, which has gone on over so many billions of years, is going to oblige us and satisfy our really puny little ideas of what is good and what is bad and what is ethical and what is unethical. It is really at that level
a certain sense of entitlement which is born out of, for want of a better word, absolute silliness. Yeah? It's essentially not being able to look at things from a perspective which is a bit impersonal, incapacity to detach oneself from one's very, very petty personal prejudices. Yeah? Essentially, it means somehow or the other, this oxygen and the air that brings it to me is something that I am entitled to. The sun, with its energy that it pours on this earth, is something that I am entitled to. It has nothing to do with that. It's really, I mean, if anything, it's something that one can be grateful for. It's a natural thing that has happened, and we as a species have evolved in order to nourish ourselves with these natural resources. What happens then? The individuality and its ethical concerns start losing their piquancy. Yeah? The pungency with which it affects our lives, that starts getting attenuated when one starts cultivating this capacity to detach oneself. What is happening? I've been giving this considerable scientific rigmarole, but why is that relevant here? So let's come back to this last bit. Here, there is this clergyman's comment which basically somehow or the other ignores this entire larger perspective and basically tries to say that there is this very intense personal relevance of an experience, and when something is causing another person misery, asking that person, oh, you should really think it is good. This is a silly ideology, it's a silly theology which somehow or the other has two aspects. A, it has no truth value. B, it has no empathy value. This capacity to withdraw ourselves and analyze things carefully, diligently, with penetration, this is the capacity that leads us to truth. On the other hand, this capacity to be able to understand another person's joy or sorrow is what gives rise to another great virtue that human beings are endowed with, empathy. What this person is doing is A, blinding oneself to truths, B, killing this empathy in one's heart. Neither the capacity of a sharp intellect nor the capacity of a generous heart. Yeah? And therefore, this is the last statement that Vivekananda makes. Be good and have mercy on those who suffer. This is the empathy aspect of it. Then this other sentence, do not try to patch it up. In other words, probing towards truth. Nothing will cure this world. In other words, if we keep on trying to say that the world has to satisfy my notion of what is good and what is bad, my ethical standards, the world is not obliged to do that, and it never will. So which means if one tries to force the world into one's little Procrustean ethical concerns, one is bound to fail. People who are reasonably intelligent grasp that fast. People who are not keep on trying to basically satisfy their ethical concerns or their sense of what is good and what is bad by trying to adjust the world to themselves. Essentially, they end up suffering from a certain sense of entitlement and ending up in misery. The thing to avoid is lust. Is what one has opened oneself and has made oneself a prey to. What then is the answer? Basically realizing that once we are in society, we have not given up our biological heritage. And this capacity of human beings to bind together in society means that a group of creatures whose biological evolution dictates one thing, are trying to get together for some higher thing which we call good, for some convenience perhaps. But then, within any such society, this biological heritage is not going to go away. And therefore, there is going to be this mixture. And understanding and grasping and accepting that mixture is what wisdom is about. And so there he starts the next paragraph. This is a world of good and evil. Wherever there is good, evil follows. But beyond and behind all these manifestations, all these contradictions, the Vedanta finds out that unity. It says, give up what is evil and give up what is good. What remains then? Behind good and evil stands something which is yours, the real you, beyond every evil and beyond every good too. And it is that which is manifesting itself as good and bad. In other words, this ethical concern, we had taken this very common sense attitude saying that, look, this notion of good and bad, where does it come from? It basically comes from human beings coming together and trying to live in a society. And then naturally this notion of good and bad comes up. What happens if we take that particular faculty, the cause of good and evil, subjectively? What is it? It's this capacity to bind ourselves in a society. This is the cause then. What does that mean? It means that in a group of, if there is a group of people belonging to the same species, other Homo sapiens, we are able to participate in other people's lives, almost literally. What is that? What is happening really is that the focus of the eye on this individual psychophysical being is relaxed, and one has identified with a larger group of people as one's own. This then, this capacity to identify with a larger number, with a larger entity beyond one's body and mind, is the cause for a notion of good and for the notion of evil. Can we then catch hold of that particular faculty? That particular faculty will be what then? And here, these two capacities, both for penetrating knowledge and for empathy, come together. Why? The faculty of knowledge basically says that, look, this other person's concerns are essentially the same as mine, which means that I have actually detached myself from this particular psychophysical being to some extent and seen that that which is detached is the same reality in another person. What does it automatically give rise to? That person, if some experience comes my way and it would cause me pain, that same experience going the other person's way is likely to cause that person pain. So this capacity for grasping truth automatically makes one larger and develop more empathy. So usually we think that, oh, Vedanta is this dry process of inquiry where one is following a certain path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. This is actually again born out of semantic confusion. Real knowledge and real joy are actually things that coexist, and they really are conditions for one another. And so knowledge and empathy come together. You cannot have empathy without knowledge. You cannot have knowledge without empathy. Why? Empathy is really this capacity to see that another person's experiences and my experiences are in essence not different. And this capacity to abstract out that which is common in various things is exactly what the principle of knowledge is. So, really, it's looking, empathy and knowledge are really looking at the same thing, but from two different points of view. Once we start developing that capacity, what happens? This is the sentence that is being made here. Behind good and evil stands something which is yours, the real you, beyond every evil and beyond every good too, and it is that which is manifesting itself as good and bad. So what then? What is the way for us? Know that first. And then alone you will be a true optimist and not before. It's only when one has grasped that, then the terrible pangs that misery causes us and the sudden effusions of emotional outbursts that joys cause us, the piquancy of these things will be reduced. That is what the true optimism is about. Why? Because it's based on some knowledge, some clear knowledge, and not before. For then you will be able to control everything. Control everything, does it mean there's like essentially people obsessed with power who want to control other people? No. It is essentially the capacity to control one's reactions to life situations. Control these manifestations. And what manifestations? Does it mean the world around us? No. It means our emotional reaction to various life situations. And you will be at liberty to manifest the real you. First, be master of yourself. Stand up and be free. Go beyond the pale of these laws, for these laws do not absolutely govern you. They are only part of your being. First, find out that you are not the slave of nature, never were and never will be. That this nature, infinite as you may think it, is only finite, a drop in the ocean. And your soul, by that he means the essence of one's being, is the ocean. You are beyond the stars, the sun, and the moon. They are like mere bubbles compared with your infinite being. Know that, and you will control both good and evil. Then alone the whole vision will change, and you will stand up and say, how beautiful is good, and how wonderful is evil. What has happened? Essentially, this larger perspective has come into one's being, one's worldview has changed, and one has developed the capacity to embrace both the pleasant and the unpleasant as inseparable aspects of life's experience without getting overwhelmed by either. And that which is common to both a good and pleasant experience and a bad and unpleasant experience is where one has stationed one's identity. One's self-identity is not then caught up in these passing experiences of good and bad, but one has actually come to a position where good and bad are seen as aspects of the same reality, which is what we call life, or which is what one calls oneself. One more thing, very often we try to assign, so for example, one of us experiences something good or something bad. And then we try to assign causal explanations to that. In what way? Oh, suppose some evil or bad befalls one. And so it says, oh, such and such a person must have done such and such a bad thing in a previous life or some such thing. What has happened? We are basically trying to find an explanation for something as something which is an empirical experience, something, namely something which is good or bad happening in one's life, without understanding We are trying to assign a causal explanation without even asking, does this principle of causality hold here? And so what are we doing? Oh no, what really is the point of this kind of reasoning? It's basically saying that I have not asked this more fundamental question, does this principle of causality hold in terms of human experience? We have not asked that question. We have assumed that it holds. There's a jump. What is that jump? We see in our empirical observations outside, a stick is thrown into a water, it causes a ripple. Yeah? The stick is plunging into the water is the cause, and the ripple is the effect. From that, without any further analysis, what have we done? We've said that, oh, that principle of cause and effect must be exactly what guides my life. What has happened? One has removed responsibility from oneself. One has reduced oneself to that which is empirical, which is jada, as Vedanta says. And it is this reduction of something. I mean, we regard ourselves as something that is fundamentally conscious. What have we done? We have identified ourselves immediately as something that is unconscious. And we have given ourselves these silly reasons which cannot be verified. Basically trying to explain it by making up stories. Making up stories in the sense that this kind of cause and effect relationship in a previous birth or a next birth or whatever, I mean, whatever that may be, whatever kind of explanation it might be, can that be verified? Typically, no. And if it cannot, then what use is that kind of an explanation? What has happened is that instead of having this raw experience at the moment and trying to understand it for what it is, we have covered it up by a story which is largely false. This is a little step removed from that clergyman's explanation, which basically says that, oh, it has all come for your good. What then is what is really the way out? It is essentially to step back, look at the experience for what it is, and try to understand in very pragmatic, concrete, empirical terms what such an experience means to the experiencer. Namely, in this particular case, oneself. Once one grasps that, what is really going to be the way out? If it is pleasant, then is it causing some emotional effusion which is going to be, okay, for the time being very joyful, but then the next moment, leave me drained? Shobhava matyasya yadanta kaitat sarvendriyanam jarayanti teja api sarvam jivitam alpameva tavaiva vaha tavanritya gite. In Nachiketa in Kathopanishad. All this song and dance that Yama was offering him, it only titillates the senses for a while and leaves one completely exhausted. This is so far basically seeing that this so-called good in terms of an occasional emotional effusion is not of no lasting value. The same thing for something unfortunate coming one's way. If one is overwhelmed by it, what is going to happen? Nobody else is going to be affected. I will be miserable. And therefore, the wise thing to do would be to look at it and ask, is this really worth reacting to in this particular way? Is this process of inquiry? This is the process of inquiry when a raw piece of data comes your way, to put it in one's place through understanding and knowledge. It is that which will help us move forward. Not giving it some explanation, either in terms of this clergyman's way, oh, it is all for good, or this slightly more marginally more sophisticated, oh, it is from some previous birth. Who cares? See, essentially, we give some explanation, and essentially what has happened is that we've dulled our mind for the moment. It's essentially hiding something. We are assuming it's not penetrating introspection, but rather, for the time being, we throw some explanation at it so that this mind which wants to inquire, which wants to know the truth, is dulled. Yeah? And again, that's why Vivekananda says this process of inquiry in Vedanta is not something that blinds the child, yeah, by giving it some kind of narrative, but rather lay it on adamantine foundations. What is that adamantine foundation? It's this, it's truth. And there is a process of arriving at it, which is called inquiry. It is exactly the technique that when we study the external world, that's called the scientific method of inquiry. That same method directed towards one's inner life is what Vedanta is about. And that's what is being encouraged here. Okay, I'll stop here. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.